For this exercise, I'm going to give you a set of techniques that you can use for illustrating your cards. This is the kind of thing that's going to merge what we do in Adobe Illustrator with some tools and techniques we use in Adobe Photoshop. And it's meant to give you some really cool ways of thinking about adding dynamic textures and colors to what would otherwise be a very flat, simple design. And so here's my example here that I did for the Jack card. To get started on this, we'll close this out. When you go to the class Moodle page, locate the Card Illustration Practice folder and go ahead and download the entire folder. Inside of this folder, once you unzip it and open it up, here's what I'm giving to you. Of course, I'm giving you a copy of the instructions that we're going to follow through this. Now, for these instructions, there really is no step-by-step thing to follow. This is kind of a thing where you just get an idea of what we're doing, and I'm going to leave it up to you for how you want to lay this out. So use this as a starting point for your particular illustration. Now, for this exercise, I'm giving you 3 different artworks that you can pick and choose from. You only need to do one of these illustrations. You can use the Jack card, the King, or the Queen card. They're going to be given to you as an Adobe Illustrator file, and you can see that they're all just in black and white. What we're going to do is to take these files, colorize them, and then bring them into Adobe Photoshop to add the textures and refine the final style for this one. It is going to be a little bit tedious, but overall it's not going to be very complex to do. So let's get started and jump in. The first thing we need to do to get started is to go to color.adobe.com and open up their color picker. Remember, whenever you start a project, it's good to have a set of colors that we can focus in on. You can use these colors throughout your entire package design, and it keeps everything nice and consistent. Rather than just randomly picking a variety of different colors, we want to keep everything nice and honed in to about 5 different colors to choose from. Now with this, you can either extract it from an existing photograph, or you can explore some different themes that are already created. I'm going to click on Explore and see what has been pulled up. Here you can see these are things that people have done from a variety of different pictures. Ooh, looking at these, I kind of like some of these warmer colors that people have used. I really like this one. If you want to be able to use it, the easiest thing you can do is to make a screenshot of this particular piece. To do that, I'm going to do Shift-Command-4 if you're on a Macintosh computer, and then highlight and select that particular part. If you're not on a Mac computer, you could be able to download this as an ASE file, or you can take a screenshot on your own particular computer to work on. The next thing we need to do is to open up one of our card sets. So I'm going to use let's do the Queen card for this example, and we're going to open it up in Adobe Illustrator. Close out what I was working on earlier. We'll save that and go from there. Now, once we've got this placed in here, we need to place our color scheme that we're going to be using. Since I have it saved as a screenshot, I'm going to go up to File, down to Place. I'm going to locate that screenshot, and I'm going to place it into this document. Just clicking once will be able to give us this. Now, in order to save each one of these as their own individual color, we need to open up our Swatches panel and then save each one of these as their own individual swatches. Now, here's how I like to do it. I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create 5 different rectangles. Now, the size of these rectangles doesn't really matter for what we're going to do, but each one of these is going to represent a different swatch that we have. Now, to assign the color, I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, and I can click on, holding down the Command key, select this first one. When I let go of the Command key, it'll go back to my eyedropper, and I can click on the color that I want. So again, Command and select the rectangle, let go of Command, and click on the swatch. Command, click, let go of Command, Command, click, and then Command, click. When you let go, it'll select that swatch. So that's how we can use the eyedropper to quickly and easily assign these colors. Once those colors are assigned to different objects, we can get rid of our swatch that we have, And now we can save these inside of a folder by themselves. I'm going to use my Move tool, the black arrow tool, to click and drag and select all of the swatches at once. Then when I open up my Swatches panel, click on the little folder icon to create a new color group. It's going to ask you to give the group a name. To be honest, you can name it whatever you want. So I'm going to call this my card swatches. A-T-C-H-S. There we go. We're going to use the selected artwork and include those swatches within here. So with the selected artwork selected, when I say OK, notice now that I have a folder that has all of those swatches assigned to here. So it's a great and easy way to add swatches that you've already selected, and you've got them now saved within this particular folder. With that done, we can get rid of all these 5 squares, and we can focus on colorizing the artwork that we've already created. Now, when I designed this particular design, I intentionally created the artwork in shades of gray. I know that if my work looks good in black and white, whatever color I add to it can match those tints and shades of those values. So the first thing I would do when you start to design your card is design it just in black and white first. Then you can go back in and start to add the color, and then later on we can go in and start to add the textures on top of this. So this is why I'm giving it to you just in black and white, and I encourage you to work this way for your particular design for your cards as well. So with this done, to quickly colorize this, we want to add those colors that we've saved up. Here's a method of doing it. I've got my Move tool. I'm going to select all of my artwork, and then look at the very top in your control panel for the Recolor Artwork icon. When you click on this icon, it's going to give you all of the tints and shades and values that's in this artwork. If you'll notice off to the side, you've got all the different color groups that have been saved within your color palette. And here's your card swatches that we created earlier. What we want to do is to start assigning these colors to the different values that are already on here. Now, this can be a tedious process, so I'm going to give you a method that will automatically do it for you and give you some ways of kind of randomizing it and moving it around. So on this right-hand side, click on the card swatches that you created, and you can see this is going to start to combine all of your swatches together. The next thing we want to do is to force them to use just these colors instead of picking one color that you see right here. So also, one thing I'll point out is do make sure you've got Recolor Artwork checked on. To customize this, click on the little options on the very top center for here. We're going to keep the colors settings to auto, so it'll automatically pick the number of colors that we want and that we have. We're going to limit our libraries to the default swatches that we already have selected, so keep it at none if you haven't done so already. But we want to sort these. In our case, we're going to sort these based on their lightness going from dark to light. Also, the colorize method is the tints and shades, and we want to be able to combine the tints and include whites and blacks and have those checked on. When I say OK, this will automatically start to recolorize your artwork based on the colors that are already there. Now you can see that in doing this, sometimes gives you really good results and sometimes maybe not. So now we need to play around with how these look on your particular design. Even if they're a little bit dark, we can still go in and start to tweak these designs. What I like to do is to play around with the settings that are down here that allow you to randomize the colors that are with this. So with this selected, if you hover over this, this will randomly change up either the colors order, so I can click on it and it will randomly assign it to some different colors. This is starting to give me something that's really, really interesting. You can also randomize the hue, the saturation, and the brightness of it. So this will give us some lighter or darker versions of those colors. And the last one will allow you to view this in black and white version. So I'm not going to really use those. So the two things that I'm clicking on are these two buttons to randomly assign the values that I like, or I can choose this to change up the hues and the values, the tints and shades. Once you get something that you like, you can say OK to this, and that will lock in your color choices. Now, if you get something that you don't like, at any time you can always hit cancel, and this will go back to your regular artwork, and you can restart the process over again. Since I got something that I like and I think I can work with, I'm going to say OK to this. It'll say, do you want to save changes? We'll say sure and save that. And this will update your artwork and your swatches that you have as well. Now from here, I can do the same thing for all of my other artwork that I have. It's a great way to quickly and easily colorize a black and white illustration into a color set that we've been working in. The next thing that we want to do is to take all of our artwork, bring it into Photoshop, and start adding some texture and some other dynamic illustration techniques that we've been using to make our artwork look a lot more unique and interesting. Now, in order to do this in Photoshop, I want to show you a special way of saving your Illustrator file so that it can be opened in Photoshop and have all of your objects on their own separate layer. This is going to make a big file, but it will give you full control over exactly how this looks. So to do this, open up your Layers panel. I'm going to drag mine off so we can see it. Inside my Layers panel, I'm going to rename my Layer 1, in this case my Queen card. You can name yours whatever design that you have for this, as long as it has a name. The next thing we want to do is to break up our artwork so that all of these objects are on their own individual layer, because right now everything is in one layer by itself. So to do this, we're going to go back up to our layer options, clicking on this, scrolling down, we're going to release the layers to a sequence build. Once it's done, it's going to take all the layers that we have and place them inside of their own individual layer. The next thing we can do now is to save this as a Photoshop file. To export it as a Photoshop file, go up to File and down to Export. Notice I'm not going to save. When you do export, we'll do an export as. One of the formats that you can choose is going to be a Photoshop file. There it is, .psd. With that done, I'm going to save mine to the desktop where I have a folder to place this into. Just know where you're going to save it to. And notice that the Photoshop is the format that we have. When I say export, we can keep the settings by default. You can keep the resolution relatively low, but usually I like to keep mine around 300 ppi. Make sure that writing layers is turned on. We do not want to have a flattened image. With this done, we can say OK. Give it a second to save it up. And once it's done, we should have a nice Photoshop file that we can work from. I'm going to back out. And here's our Photoshop file for our Queen card. With this, we can open it up in Photoshop. And when we open up our Layers panel in Photoshop, you can see that the Queen is inside of its own individual folder, and that folder has all the different layers, and each layer has each individual part. From here, we can start to add the textures inside of each of the different parts of our illustration. Now for the next part of this project, I'm asking you to either photograph, scan, or otherwise find a variety of textures that you can use for this project. For the examples that I'm giving, I found a bunch of magazines, and I literally just used my phone to take a picture of the different textures that I found within these books and magazines that I can import into this project. For you, if you want, you can go on Google and Google a variety of textures. The thing about this, it tends to work best if you can find a good variety of different fun things. Let me show you some examples that I used. I will provide these examples online, but I want to give you the ability to use your examples for your project. Here's some things that I'm looking for. For my textures, when I open this up, here's some things that I found. So like I said, I found these straight from magazines. Anything that's got repeating patterns, good light and dark, lots of lines, even things that have got different colors, different subtle textures like pictures of clouds, things that are, even if it's blurry, can be used. Different shapes work really, really well. Sometimes you'll find things that can be more useful than others, but really these are the kinds of things that as long as you've got a good variety to pull from, you'll find yourself getting really, really good results. So go through and try to find a variety of different textures in magazines, books, and newspapers. Otherwise, you're welcome to use these within your particular design. What we want to do is to import these textures into the Photoshop document that you're working on and start playing around with those colors. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to close out my Queen card Photoshop file. I won't have to save what I have. I don't want to lose my original Queen Photoshop card. Instead, I want to take that artwork and place it inside of my own card template. Now, you can find this template on the class Moodle page. I'm going to go back to our package design folder. There it is here. Go to the class page and download the Poker Card Template Photoshop file. Once it's downloaded, you can open it up in Photoshop, and this is the exact template that's going to be used when I send it off to the printer. It's already got everything set up the correct size, and you can see the gray area is going to be the bleed edge, the red outline is going to be the edge of the card, and all of my artwork needs to be inside of this. For now, this is just going to be our background layer. Let's place my Queen card inside of here. So I'm going to go up to File, down to Place Embedded. With Place Embedded done, let's go to my desktop, and here's where I've got my Queen card selected. You find your card and place it in here. Since I'm placing a Photoshop document inside of this, I can scale it down and let it fill up the area as much as I want. In this case, I'm just going to place it with that. We'll hit the checkbox and have it placed in here. Now keep in mind, we've placed it and created as a smart object layer. This means a copy of this is going to be saved within this Photoshop file. If I want to make changes to this artwork, I can double click on it. This will open up my Queen card Photoshop file, and here's where I can start to make the changes to my poker card. So with that done, I've double clicked on my card. Now let's start placing those textures within the design. Again, I'm going to go to my layers and open up the Queen folder. What I want to do is to be able to quickly and easily select the different parts of my illustration. To do this, I've got my Move tool selected, the little black arrow. Up at the very top, make sure you have Auto Select checked on and also Show Transform Controls selected as well. While we're here, do make sure that Layer is turned on too. When you select all of these, this will easily let you click on an object and it will automatically jump to the appropriate layer and let you know that you have it selected. You may have to zoom in order to see the bounding box, but this is a great and quick and easy way of working. So to add the texture, say to the Queen's hat, her little crown that she has up here, what we want to do is with it selected, let's place one of those textures on top of this design. The quickest and easiest way of doing this is to just drag this out of the way. I'm going to open up my textures folder, and I can drag on any one of these textures that I want to this design. Let's do it for this one. So I've got this nice design. I love the little repeating line work that's here. With it, we'll click on it, drag it onto our document. Give it a second to think about it. Oh, come on, let's try it again. Click and drag, there we go. Once it's placed inside of here, remember we may want to do a check, and then you can scale it down to fill out that area. Now the next thing we want to do is to be able to embed this within the shape that's below it. In other words, I want this texture to fill in just this area. To do that, we're going to create a clipping mask. So with our texture selected, you can go up to Layer and down to Create Clipping Mask. There it is there. And this will clip that texture inside of that area. Now I can move around this picture. I can even rotate it and scale it. Let's see, I may have to zoom out in order to see it. There we go. We'll rotate this into place. And now I've got a nice little texture. If you want, you can even scale this up and distort it however you want. And that's going to fill in that texture. The last thing that I want to do is I still want to be able to see the color that I've colorized that particular shape. So with it done, let's change our blending mode to something that will pick up on the colors below it, like multiply, color burn, sometimes screen or even overlay will give you those kind of look and feel. So this is a great and simple, easy way of adding texture to an otherwise flat design. Let's do the same for her hair in the background. So I've clicked on the hair, and you can see it automatically selects the layer. Let's go in now and find a texture that we can fill in for her hair. I really like this kind of leaf-like texture. It's all crackled in that. So I'm going to drag it onto my document. Keep in mind, when you do this, it's going to place it automatically on top of the layer that we have. You can hit the check. Now that it's on top, we can create our clipping mask. So you can go up to the options and create clipping mask. It'll clip it inside of the area. And now I can move that picture around to get the texture that I want. I can even scale it by clicking on my bounding box. And if you need to, you may have to zoom in or zoom out to do that. Let's see, I kind of like something like this. There we go. Once you get the scale that you like, you can go in and with the texture layer selected, change up your blending mode. If I set it to multiply, it'll multiply in those colors. Overlay, anything like this will give you some really cool texture design for its layout. Let's do luminosity. Now if you find the texture is a little bit overpowering, you can always drop down the opacity of it. And this will give it a little bit lower kind of look to this. So this is the process we're going to repeat. Go through and add textures to each part of your design. It's flat, it's got flat color, and each of those different objects are on their own layer. Find some textures and drag them into your design, and then use a clipping mask to mask it into here. Once it's in there, change up your blending mode on your layers so that those textures blend in with the design that you have. Once you're finished, you should have a design that's got all these textures inside of each individual part of your design. And you can see how I was able to give that kind of results for this illustration. The last thing you're going to do is to save this document. So let's go to File and Save. Remember, since we're working inside of a smart object, when I close this out and I go back to my poker card, you can see that my poker card is automatically updated from here. Now here's the final thing we're going to do to this card. Once you get your figure nice and colorized and texturized, we need to do something for the background. I'm going to select the background layer, and with it selected, let's give it either a solid or a gradient fill color. Go up to Layer and down to New Fill Layer, and in my case, I like gradient, so I'm going to choose a gradient fill color. It's going to ask you to give it a name, and we'll say OK. And from here, I can pick and choose a variety of different gradient styles. Now, some of these are pre-done, so if I choose one of these, you can see how that would look. Or I can choose one of these. Or if I wanted to really customize this, let's say I wanted to do, I like this one, but I want to change the colors of it. You can, instead of clicking on the down arrow, click on the gradient itself, and this will pull up your color picker, and you can click on any of these gradient colors, and now I can start to pull in some of the colors that are actually inside of my artwork. A final thing you can do is to play around with the style of it. If you choose a radial gradient, this will go from the center point outward, or you can choose, I like the angled one. And you can click on the actual gradient and move it around. So in this case, the angle, you see how it's changed up with this? Well, if I click on the actual gradient, I can move it into place, and I can give it this kind of background. Let's give it something a little bit more, kind of like the reds, the warm colors with that. We'll say OK to that. Once you get your gradient fill done, this is a quick and easy way of adding a design to the back of your card. Now, from here, this could be the setup for my card. I can go in, I can add my own artwork to it. I can add the Q at the top or the number or whatever design that I have that I want to create. Just remember, for this project, you're going to be creating a set of cards, full deck set of cards. So you're doing 52 of these. What I would do is design one queen card for each of the suits, go in and colorize them in Illustrator, and then add textures and other details in Photoshop, and you can see how that's quickly done with this method. When we're finished with this, I do want you to save the Photoshop document. So I'll do Command S, that'll save up the template. But to upload this, save this as a JPEG image. So I'm going to go back to File and Save As. I'm going to change my format from Photoshop to JPEG. You can then give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it my card practice, or practice card, and say Save. And we'll say OK to these options, keeping it at the maximum compatibility. That JPEG will be a nice small image that you can upload to the class Moodle page for this exercise grade.